Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty, a counselor faculty at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, Associate Faculty and Program Director at Divine Mercy University.
I keep forgetting that and Program Director part on my title. That tells you something right there. Folks, we get together on this podcast, and the first 10 minutes of us before we start recording it is talking about all the persecutions one gets as a program coordinator. So whether you're in counseling or any other place, if you're a program coordinator, we should do a separate podcast just on program coordinators and their gripes. This is our 50th episode. I mean, we started this years ago and got about 7 episodes out and then let it drop for a long period of time and then came back and said, let's try and do this every week. And we've been pretty good about it with a couple of spaces for vacations and things like that. So, yeah, we're happy to hit 50 with the podcast. So thanks for doing this, Eric.
Yeah, always a good time.
Well, this week we're going to talk about live stream part 2. If you missed the prequel last week, I was setting up to do a live stream. And the live stream was of some technology projects that a grant I'm working on, the teachers had done, and we were going to live stream it because they come from all different countries. We were going to live stream it, which we've done before using different kinds of platforms like Facebook, and we've done it before on YouTube, but mainly Facebook is where we were doing a lot of our live streaming. And we've done multiple camera options and we've had live chats. So it wasn't really any stranger to us, but I wanted to do something a little different with multiple cameras and again through a YouTube channel. So where we left off last week was we talked about different software and how to do it. So if you want to know about the hardware basically and the software, we start that discussion last week and last episode with live stream part 1. This is live stream part 2. And we recorded live stream part 1 the day before I actually did the live stream and tried to execute it. I had found a piece of software that integrated multiple inputs and sent it out to up to 3 different streaming services. I was only going to do one. And it was called Restream. And it worked well when I tested it the Friday before. It worked well when I tested it the Monday before. And the live stream was going to be on Wednesday. So we talked about it on the episode that we recorded a week ago on Tuesday. And I thought, okay, this is going to be good to go. We'll talk about how it executes. Well, I got in there an hour early, started setting up all the equipment, got all the connectors connected properly from what I could tell, started the Restream software, and actually it connected to the YouTube channel that I had put together pretty easily. The problem was there was no audio, and we could not figure out for the life of us where in Restream there was problems with the audio, whether it was coming out of Restream and not making it into YouTube, or YouTube was not picking it up. There was no way to troubleshoot this. And so we had a few presentations going on. Now, we've announced this. We put a calendar out. If you're from Tunisia, this is when the Tunisian teacher is going to speak, et cetera, et cetera. So the gun was to our head on this. We had to try and solve this problem. And I was just totally frustrated. We went for about an hour trying to figure it out. I did. Restarting it, starting it back up, checking all the inputs. We had 2 webcams going into my MacBook Pro, and we had a microphone. I had my Shure MV7 Plus, so I had a really good microphone, the one I'm using for this podcast. And we had that plugged in, a nice directional microphone for it to work, and we weren't getting anything. And so I got really frustrated because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to punt. We had people who were expecting to see us on YouTube. So whatever we had to do had to go to YouTube. And apparently, Restream was not working that way. I could have set up the channel directly. That would have put me down to one camera, and start the stream through YouTube without going through Restream. And I thought about that for a while, and eventually, two of the teachers, Taif and Hamid. Taif was from Jordan. Hamid was from Bangladesh. And they said, listen, our students are back in our home countries waiting to see us, and all they're telling us is that there's no sound. And I'm like, yeah. Well, would you mind if we take a look at it? I was like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And so I was not the most patient person at that time. And they came over and looked at it, and they said, let's do OBS. OBS is Open Broadcaster Software. And we talked about it the week before in the
Hmm.
previous episode. And my only experience with it was that, and this was probably 6 years ago, I had another tech person teaching that course, and they set it up through OBS, and it seemed like they had some complications and some drops. So I was like, I don't know. But they said, well, let's see if we can set this up. And I said, okay, go ahead, do it. You're so smart, you figure it out. They downloaded the software. Of course, they needed me there to kind of do some stuff with, permissions and things like that with my computer. But they got it set up in about 30 minutes. And I watched them do it, and I thought, this is not hard to set up. And we started the stream, and we were maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours late, and we were going to go for 6 hours. So we started the stream, and it worked. And endpoint was it was coming through. Both cameras were working. We did some resizing because, with OBS, you kind of take your screen and chop it in your output screen and chop it into sections if you want to put a camera here, and then a larger portion of the screen that is the PowerPoint that the person is talking about. I was remarkably convinced that I was convinced that this is going to be a pain in the butt. And then after they did it after 30 minutes and it worked, I was convinced that this is probably the way I'm going to go from now on.
Right.
Immediately canceled my Restream account. Now,
Right.
there's some of that I regret because I think that software has some really good purpose. It just didn't work for me when I needed it on the day that I needed it. And it was like, I don't want to put myself in this position again. And it could have been me, maybe that what we were trying to do and how it was handled, some setting I didn't know about, but I wasn't going to sit there and go through, support documents to figure out why this wasn't working. And actually, I Googled some things to say Restream and YouTube with no sound, and other people had those problems with that they indicated in Reddit. So I must have run into the same situation that those folks had. So nothing bad necessarily to say about Restream. It didn't work for me, and OBS came through.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Reddit too, and having not used it much, I kind of went down the Reddit rabbit hole looking
Mhm.
at OBS, Streamlabs OBS, which is funnily referred to as slobs, which I got a kick out of, right? Thanks, Reddit. And then Restream, and there does seem to be finicky issues with every platform here and
Mhm.
there, but I feel the frustration doing two test runs and working great, and then on the day of just decides to not do what you need it to do.
Yeah, and I don't handle that well, particularly when I always have a certain level of anxiety about, is this going to work or is it not going to work? Particularly since this had what I thought was if it was just I was going to stream it to another class and it didn't work, no big deal. But we had members of the grant. I was like pushing it to our funders, saying, you got to see this.
Sure.
This is something we do with our grant that no other site does, and it gets them to actualize their technology training into something that's a project that they can take back within their country's context, that they can take back and solve a problem with the technology platform that they have in their in availability that they have in their country. So we thought it was really good. And we've done it before, but I'm like, okay, we're gonna pizzazz them this time.
Right.
And and I have to say, in previous attempts of trying to get them on board in terms of the grant funders to see this, we've had a few people drop in, not a lot. We've encouraged them to share it with other grant sites so they could drop in and see what we're doing. That never happens. Occasionally, we'll have some of our teachers from a similar country contact other grant sites for their country compadre
Mhm.
person who's at that other site, and they'll tune in to see what they're doing. But there was it felt like it was the stakes were kind of elevated for me on that, and I like to challenge myself, but this was really upsetting me. And luckily, Tafe and Hamed kind of stepped in and found a solution that worked. The instructor that does teach the tech class came to me and said, next year, if we do this, we got to do something completely different. And I'm like, no, we're doing this, because
We're
we
not trying
finally found
anything new.
some, yeah, we found something that worked. It took us a couple hours to find it, and it's remarkably easy to set up. If you have set up any kinds of, and even if you haven't, I think the support information on it is strong enough that you can figure out how to turn microphones on, turn microphones off, how to turn on and off cameras if you want to do that. And then simply it's a matter of kind of dragging the windows
Yeah.
and placing in the window whatever you want as your output, or pane, I should call, not the whole window, but a window pane sort of section of the window where you're going to
Mhm.
drop whatever the output is. Its latest release was August 15th of this year. This is what I believe is an open source software. So it's a bunch of programmers who have decided to contribute code and their time in creating a product that is free of charge for people to use. It comes in Windows, Mac OS, and also Linux if you want to run a Linux version of it. And I will place the link in the podcast notes. It's simply obsproject.com. And that link will give you the information that you need and show you what you can do with setting it up. First it's a
And
matter of downloading the software and then the features that are involved. Go ahead, Eric.
sure. I was just going to say, if it's any consolation, if you look up Restream and OBS, every Restream discussion mentions OBS. None of the
Yeah.
OBS discussions mention Restream. So,
So, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
it just seems to be the popular choice, which is, I think, pretty crazy for a freeware, crowdsourced kind of thing, or open source rather. That I think is pretty interesting. They do mention a lot that there are additional tools and plugins for OBS, depending on what it is that you want to do. So there are options to kind of customize if there's specific tasks. I haven't dug too much into it, but I saw some folks who clearly have some experience with it, using some different plugins and tools along with OBS to help them, customize the experience.
So, are you seeing comparisons between Restream and OBS? Because they're essentially doing the same thing. They're sending out whatever you're compiling or putting together from your computer out to the internet to some service. It's
Yeah,
not like
same.
you're using Restream and OBS or Restream through OBS. They're similar products
Mhm.
uh, to accomplish the same task.
Yeah, they're the same thing. They're providing the same kind of task. They're just different models and platforms. But I thought it was interesting too that there were OBS plugins.
Yeah.
So it'll ATIUM, ATIUM is a plugin that allows for multi-stream on a few platforms and does TikTok streaming. So depending on what you want to do and the platforms you want to use, there's a little bit of customization for OBS that really isn't available for Restream. It kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and they also what I talked about in terms of the arrangement of panes in the window, they refer to as scenes.
Mhm.
And this was big with gamers. So, gamers would love to live stream to their YouTube channel
Sure.
what's going on their game and what their conversation is and a chat room that's associated with it. So all of that gets thrown out to YouTube. So you can set up a variety of scenes, which could include if you're just using the game or if you're using other components in it, and you can switch back and forth between those scenes, which is pretty cool. Again, I just got into the bare bones. Let's set this up and go with it. Tafe and I disagreed a little because he was like, it's important to see the person. Yeah, but if they're looking at the YouTube channel to look at their PowerPoint, which is essentially a poster like you would have at a conference,
Mhm.
people need to be able to have enough size of it that they can read the poster,
Sure.
because talking head doesn't give you information. It's just a person with the audio. So we wound up doing some resizing. As the streams went on, we would do some changes with them to make it happen. So people would have a good view of the posters and the gifts that were associated. Now, we ran into some problems only because some people saved their PowerPoint at such a low resolution that by the time we got it, it was fuzzy,
Right.
and so nothing was going to fix that. So we learned some things about it. And then some of the designs were so full of stuff. It reminds me of the old website days where they had JavaScript banners and all sorts of,
Oh yeah.
and like six different font styles. And then some folks did their country's color, which was black, and that was one of their flag colors. Well, a black background doesn't necessarily work very well, particularly with small white type. So
Right.
the conversation I had with the tech person, who's the tech instructor, was, yeah, we got to do something. We got to remember, every year I run into this, we got to remember to teach them about design and minimalist design. Um,
I think that's a whole show in and of itself,
yeah,
right? Just
yeah.
the
Okay. Well, we can talk about that, but
yeah,
that's a great idea. We'll maybe do that as the next show.
presentation do's and don'ts.
Yes. So seriously, take a look at OBS as a possibility and consider some options for streaming in your class. Ideas of maybe finding similar classes at other institutions and finding a way to stream through to other classes that are teaching the same thing, or maybe classes that are unique to your institution and your program, and take a session of your class and maybe stream it out and let other people come in and take a look at what you're doing and generate some ideas. I think I mentioned we have an advanced theories course here that I get to teach. And so I did some early on with just the YouTube channel and not kind of combined cameras and combine inputs that OBS and other types of streaming software, live stream software permits. You might think of things that you could stream that are unique to your particular institution that you can do a little kind of show off a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a different way to kind of view content, right? It's not just that static single camera focused, I thought it was neat when we could focus in and zoom in and out, right? And then now we
Yeah.
have the ability to use multiple cameras, angles, audio and video streams. I think it just changes the whole experience.
Yeah, I remember it might have been 1998 when we had those little Logitech eyeball cameras
Hmm.
and plugging them in and attempting to do video conferencing using a Microsoft platform. I can't remember what it was back then, but it was an app that was set up and faculty member Mike Baltimore and I spent close to 6 months trying to figure out how to get this thing to work. And I spent time running up and down the hall to Mike's office to give verbal directions, having to load codecs. I don't know if you remember that, Eric,
I
codecs,
do.
and having to put the right codecs in to get things to run. And we eventually got that system working, and how much different things have changed now. I really was looking for a turnkey solution. And some of the solutions that we talked about last week, including Ecamm, which I've got an account for. I'd love to do more with Ecamm. And it is a premier kind of solution for this. There's a learning curve with it that I still have to climb to figure out to use it securely, so I don't run into the same situation I ran into finding Restream, I thought was here's a turnkey operation. Very simple. Anybody with very little tech skill set could go in and do it. I still suggest listeners check that out if you're going to attempt to do some of this. And then OBS. And there's not a big learning curve on OBS, but it's not impossible. But I think having someone there to help you with it is good too, if you can test out OBS. You meant in the chat room, boy, that brings back trauma for me, since everything trauma nowadays.
Everything's fun.
Microsoft Net Meeting was what it was
Mm-hmm.
the application. Or you said or C360?
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
remember.
another. Yeah, I think that was like their attempt at branding it was Z360. It's
Why? They didn't
interesting
have
how
360 cameras. They just had, one little ball with a dot in it.
it made me chuckle. And just the Z360 because it's a static, ball camera. But net
Oh,
meeting
man.
didn't last very long. There's actually a history and evolution of video conferencing. If you're interested in it, I found an article that gives you kind of the background and context of all this stuff. And just looking
Can
through.
can you send me the link and I'll post it in the show notes?
Yeah, it's for anybody who wants to really geek out over it because there's things on there that I remember, and to think about how just old, I guess, is a bad word, but how far we've come with some of these that have stuck around and some of the ones that have fallen off.
Yeah.
Polycom used to be the big thing too. Polycom systems.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
But Polycom is not really a desktop turnaround.
No, no.
You had to have the camera, you had to have the big screen. Everybody came into the meeting room, and then you
Hmm.
had those 360 or those tabletop microphones that were placed around the room. Oh, wow. I'm looking at the history of net meeting. Yeah, it was Internet Explorer 3 and Internet Explorer 4. That tells you something there with it. But yeah, I'll do a little digging. You did send me the link. I'll go ahead and post this as part of the show notes for the show. Anything else?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah, good show.
Next episode, presentation do's and don'ts.
Yeah, with a
And
techie focus.
we'll try and come up with some ideas around that. You can email us at the podtalknetwork@gmail.com, and we will try to answer your question in the podcast. If we can get an answer for you, look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast servers. Hey, I'm starting another podcast, Eric.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Actually, tonight. It's called Old Mac, and I was going to call it Old Mac Guys, and I switched it to Gang because I wanted to make it more gender neutral, and because I anticipate we have some Old Mac not guys who could be part of it. It is a show we're gonna keep again to like 20 or 30 minutes max. And these are a panel of folks who have been using Macs for a long time. And really, the question we're going to pose is we're all over the age of 65. So, what do people our age need to use in terms of technology? What are the things we're getting into? And, Apple with their iPhone 16 and with the AirPods Pro 2 have taken on sort of the hearing aid business with the availability of having hearing aids available for folks who need it through their Bluetooth headphones or
Mhm.
earbuds. Now, Apple started that project, and the FEC just came out, or FCC, sorry, just came out with a regulation that says all Bluetooth headphones should have hearing aid capabilities. So that's a new kind of thing that fits that demographic. People are interested in it. So we're going to look at tech, apps, and hardware that kind of fit the demographic of 65 plus with that. And I've got some interesting folks who have agreed to be panelists. And it's one of those, let's see who shows up for coffee this morning. And then we'll talk about the topics as they are. So it's called Old Mac Gang, or OMG for short. And I wanted to keep that. You can find it on YouTube at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. And that'll be our streaming site for it. And we'll, of course, put it out as a podcast. So that's a new thing that I'm doing. Hey, for this podcast, though, our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Look for other shows like Circular Firing Squad. We're having a great time with that. And a new show on spatial computing called Vision Profiles. That's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.